Hey everybody, I hope you are all having an amazing week. Do you guys ever get stuck behind somebody in line that wants to become like best friends with the cashier at the grocery store or at the drugstore? And even though they've already made their purchase, they hang around and keep chatting with the employee, preventing you from just being able to go through the line and go home. Well, I was on a cruise a couple of months ago and I walked up to the deli on the ship to get a sandwich. At first, I was kind of annoyed because there's a guy there talking to the sandwich lady, and it was making me have to wait forever. I just wanted to get my sandwich and go. I couldn't help but listen in as the sandwich girl was asking him why he wears so many rings. He literally had a ring on every finger. He looked at her and he said, "Because if I take these off, it says Wild West on my knuckles." I thought to myself, nope, I'm not buying it. There's no way he has Wild West tattooed on his knuckles. He looked at the girl and said, "You don't believe me, do you?" As you can see, folks, he wasn't lying. She then asked, "Why did you get that tattoo?" He said, "Because I am the Wild West." Just goes to show that a person holding up the line might just have an interesting story to tell you if you just give them a little bit of your time. And if you like interesting stories, I've got some good news for you. The cruise news this week has got some bangers. Our first story is going to bring spring break to a screeching halt for some unfortunate cruise passengers this year. Let's get into it.
Carnival Cruise Line has just changed the minimum age for a solo cruiser from 18 to 21 right before the popular spring break cruise season. That's right, the crew will be checking IDs of passengers at embarkation, and if you're under 21 and not accompanied by a parent or at least someone over the age of 21, you're not getting on the ship. Can you imagine going on a spring break cruise with your mom? Carnival has made it clear that they will not be issuing refunds for passengers that didn't read the rules before booking the cruise. Why do you think Carnival made this change? Are they trying to escape having the reputation of being the party line?
We need to talk about Royal Caribbean getting called out by the CDC. It's a really concerning story. And we also have to cover the young girls that claim they were treated like criminals by some Carnival crew members. But first, we should talk about the possibility of some new taxes affecting the cruise industry. Here's the story.
Cruise lines were blindsided yesterday with U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick stating that cruise lines will have to pay more in taxes under the Trump administration. Cruise lines intentionally flag their ships in countries like Panama or Liberia so they can avoid having to pay U.S. federal taxes. The Cruise Lines International Association immediately hit back, saying that they pay $250 billion in taxes in the U.S. and support 290,000 U.S. jobs. How all this shakes out in the end is hard to say, but an increase in taxes will most likely end up making cruises more expensive, as I'm pretty sure the CEOs won't want to take a pay cut to make up the difference. An immediate response to Lutnick's statement was cruise stocks taking a big hit. What do you think? Should cruise lines have to pay U.S. federal tax even if the ships are registered in a different country?
If you're watching this video, it's likely that at least once or twice you've daydreamed about what it might be like to actually live on a cruise ship. If that's your dream and you have a couple of $1 million to spare, you're going to love our next story.
Have you ever thought about living on a cruise ship? 63-year-old Deborah Kilgore has. She just purchased a $1.9 million one-bedroom, 1.5 bath aboard the Storylines cruise ship MV Narrative, a residential ship scheduled to depart in 2027. The ship sails the world and sets itself apart by choosing its destinations based on the votes of its passengers. Deborah will be living alone with her 9-year-old dog Chocho Bella. Yes, pets are allowed, and there is even a veterinarian aboard the ship. What do you think? Would you consider retiring on a cruise ship?
Royal Caribbean was not only called out by the CDC, but also by a lawyer who proudly calls himself the lawyer that makes a living suing cruise lines. Not a great situation to be in, and over on the Carnival Glory, 2 young girls also found themselves in a really bad place when they claimed they felt like they were being interrogated about a fire that started on their balcony. They thought they did the right thing by telling a crew member. Here's the story.
3 young ladies are claiming that they were treated like criminals after a fire broke out on the Carnival Glory cruise ship. The fire broke out on a balcony occupied by the 3 young ladies, who then immediately alerted crew who responded and extinguished the flames. The ladies claim that after the incident, they were treated like criminals and not the victims they were, and that they were subjected to mandatory urine tests for pregnancy, which seems completely inappropriate and really doesn't make much sense. Their problems didn't end here, as they also allege crew members attempted to prevent them from taking pictures of their written statements and pressured them to sign waivers. When interacting with the Coast Guard and FBI, they say they were threatened with detention. A Carnival co-captain later did confirm that the Carnival video footage showed the young ladies were not at fault for the fire. The victims and their families are not satisfied with Carnival's response. What do you think? Did the authorities just jump to conclusions and mistreat these passengers?
Royal Caribbean has such a good reputation for cleanliness on their ships. This next story stings a little from a passenger perspective. And I'm sure that the high-ups at Royal are not happy with the management team on Symphony of the Seas. Here's that story.
Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas has been called out for some pretty serious offenses by the CDC. A man who describes himself as a lawyer who sues cruise lines for a living has made a social media post pointing out some of the problems.
Here's something you're not going to hear in mainstream media. The Centers for Disease Control last week did a spot inspection on Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas. When they went on board, what they found was absolutely horrifying. Improperly stored food, raw eggs out, not meeting the correct refrigeration temperature, raw hamburger meat at Johnny Rockets, crew members with open wounds touching ice in the ice machine with their bare hands, and here's what's worse. Several children came down with severe GI problems while in their daycare centers, and the daycare center failed to follow the protocols for referring them to the medical center and for reporting these things as acute gastrointestinal illnesses, projectile diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, to the CDC.
Sounds like Royal Caribbean needs to step it up or lawyer up when it comes to following the safety regulations on the Symphony of the Seas. What do you think? After hearing this, would you book a cruise on the Symphony of the Seas?
The TSA found 90 prohibited items in one woman's carry-on bag. In this impressive feat of either being completely unaware of any of the rules of flying that have been in place for years now, or possibly just trying to see if she could get away with it, the woman was found to have 82 fireworks, 3 knives, 2 replica firearms, and a canister of pepper spray. Obviously none of which are allowed in a carry-on bag. Travelers like this woman are who you don't want to get stuck behind in line going through security. It's estimated that more than 120 million people will be traveling this holiday season. Those kinds of numbers lead to long waits in the TSA lines, crowded airports, and increased probabilities of people running late to catch their plane. Hey, if you guys like this episode of Cruise News Central, go ahead and click on the other one that's hanging around on the screen right now. You're probably going to like that one too. Always remember, no matter what destination you choose, no matter what cruise line you choose, adventure awaits.